For 3 decades, Johnny Carson walked onto a stage that looked the same every night. Desk just so, mug in its spot, that sly half smile telling you everything was under control. He was the calm center of late night, the man who could glide through awkward pauses and clunky punchlines like a ballroom dancer, never missing a step. But that's only half the story. Live television has a wicked sense of humor, and every so often it yanked the rug out from under the most composed host in America. Those are the moments we remember, the cracks in the cool when the king of late night had to improvise with the rest of us. Carson's secret wasn't perfection, it was poise under ambush. A tomahawk lands where it absolutely shouldn't. An animal decides his head is a jungle gym. A guest hijacks a desk and the audience with pure adrenaline. And Johnny, without blinking, finds a line that turns chaos into legend. He could laugh until he wheezed, or sit in a charged silence that said more than a monologue. He knew when to push, when to yield, and when to let a guest light the fuse while he held the camera steady. The Tonight Show sold a careful image of professionalism, but the magic lived in the misfires. The unscripted gasp, the strangled laugh, the quip that wasn't written anywhere and still landed like it had been rehearsed for weeks. You can stack cue cards to the ceiling. It won't equal the electricity of a single unplanned beat that actually surprises the host and the country. That's when the show stopped being a show and turned into a shared experience people quoted at water coolers for years. And it wasn't all comedy. Sometimes the unscripted meant raw feeling, a goodbye song that left him blinking back tears, a simple poem that broke through the bright lights and found the human being behind the suit. Those flashes of vulnerability mattered because they were rare. Carson protected the boundary between the performer and the person. When that line slipped, just for a second, it felt like history. We're counting down 11 times the script lost the wheel, and Johnny made it better, funnier, messier, braver. Legends wandered in with sharp elbows, old friends broke things they shouldn't have. A snake went exploring, a superstar spoke a language no one expected, and through it all, Carson stayed Carson, riding the wave and somehow making it look easy. One of these moments, number 8, sparked a tidal wave of viewer mail and split the audience down the middle. Some called it bold, others called it out of bounds. Either way, nobody forgot it. That's the kind of TV you can't plan and the kind that lasts. Let's roll back the clock and step into the chaos. First up, a frontier demonstration that turned into the most famous laugh attack in late night history. It was supposed to be just another Tonight Show demonstration, actor Ed Ames then starring as a Native American on Daniel Boone, showing Johnny and the audience how to throw a tomahawk. A wooden cowboy silhouette was wheeled out as the target. Ames gave a quick explanation, wound up, and let the blade fly. The audience expected some frontier flair. Instead, they witnessed one of the most unforgettable mishaps in television history. The tomahawk struck with dead center precision right into the silhouette's crotch. For a split second, there was silence. Then the studio erupted in howls of laughter. The absurd placement of the tomahawk was funny enough, but what made the moment legendary was Johnny Carson's reaction. The famously controlled host completely lost it. He doubled over, clutching his sides, tears streaming down his face as the laughter rolled on for minutes. He simply could not regain composure. And in those 3 minutes, viewers saw something rare. Carson stripped of his professional mask, laughing like a kid who couldn't stop. And when Johnny finally caught his breath, he delivered the perfect aftershock. "I didn't even know you were Jewish." That single quip detonated another round of hysterics, cementing the moment as late-night gold. This wasn't just a funny accident. It was Carson at his best, turning the unpredictable into pure comedic electricity. The Tomahawk disaster has been replayed countless times because it showed Johnny as the rest of America knew him to be deep down, human, mischievous, and unable to resist a perfectly placed joke when fate handed it to him. Johnny Carson's desk was more than just furniture. It was a stage prop polished to perfection, with every item placed exactly where he wanted it. Among those objects was a wooden cigarette box, a small but prized piece that rarely left its spot. When comedian Don Rickles guest hosted The Tonight Show in 1973, he managed to do the unthinkable. He broke it. Rickles, known for chaos and insults, knew he was in trouble the moment it cracked. He joked about it on air, but the real fireworks came when Carson returned. On his first night back, Johnny held up the damaged box for the audience to see. His tone was mock-serious, dripping with dry menace as he swore revenge on Rickles. Most viewers figured that was the end of the gag. But months later, Carson took things to a level no one anticipated. Learning that Rickles was filming his sitcom CPO Sharky on a nearby soundstage, Johnny made a snap decision. With cameras in tow, he marched straight into Rickles' live taping, barging onto the set mid-scene, cigarette box in hand. The audience of CPO Sharky sat bewildered as Carson confronted Rickles, who stood frozen in his Navy uniform, caught completely off guard. "You broke my cigarette box," Carson bellowed, while Rickles stammered excuses and begged forgiveness. What followed was pure comic lightning, two giants riffing, breaking format and showing their genuine affection through mock outrage. It was rare to see Johnny abandon the safety of his own set, but with Rickles, he made an exception. That night proved two things. Carson's instinct for live comedy was unmatched, and his friendship with Rickles gave him the freedom to throw the script away and let chaos lead. As Johnny Carson's 30-year reign on The Tonight Show drew to a close in 1992, viewers expected nostalgia and laughter. What they didn't expect was to see the famously guarded host break down in front of millions. On the penultimate episode, Bette Midler joined Carson, and after some playful banter, announced she wanted to sing something special. With no build-up, she launched into the torch song One for My Baby, directing every lyric straight at Johnny. The effect was immediate. The studio went still, the audience hushed, and cameras captured something almost unheard of. Carson's eyes welling with tears. For 3 decades, he had been the master of composure, always ready with a quip to deflect emotion. But in that moment, he didn't hide. He let himself feel the weight of the goodbye, openly moved as Midler sang about last calls and farewells. Crew members later recalled the electricity in the air, that sense that television history was unfolding in front of them. When the song ended, Johnny leaned forward, kissed Midler's hand, and uttered words that said it all. "I can't top that." It wasn't a scripted punchline. It was a man acknowledging that a perfect ending had just been handed to him. The clip has since been replayed countless times, not because it was funny, but because it was real. It showed Carson stripped of his host armor, vulnerable, grateful, and deeply human, something audiences had rarely been allowed to see. Johnny Carson was no stranger to animal guests. Over the years, handlers brought everything from giant snakes to baby tigers onto his stage, and Carson always played the role of curious, if slightly cautious host. But one night in 1979, an appearance by animal handler Joanne Steele went completely off script. She introduced a lively capuchin monkey, and for a few minutes the animal sat calmly, charming the audience with its tiny antics. Then, without warning, it leapt straight onto Johnny's perfectly groomed head. The sight alone was enough to send the audience into hysterics. Carson didn't flinch, didn't panic, he simply froze in his chair, wearing that deadpan look of resigned amusement as the monkey scrambled through his hair. This was the same hair that makeup artists treated like sacred ground, always neat and immovable. Now it was sticking out in wild tufts while the monkey clung on like it had found a new jungle gym. The image of late night's smoothest host sitting motionless with a monkey perched on his head was comedy gold. When the handler finally retrieved the animal, Johnny looked straight into the camera and delivered the killer line. "And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I prefer cats." The audience roared. The whole moment captured Carson's gift, never forcing a joke, but knowing when to let the absurdity play out, and then topping it off with a perfectly timed punch. That monkey may have destroyed his hair, but it also created one of The Tonight Show's most requested clips, a reminder that Johnny didn't need to be in control to steal the laugh. By 1980, Steve Martin was already known for comedy that broke all the rules, deliberately awkward, absurd, and unlike anything audiences were used to. When he appeared on The Tonight Show with Carson that year, he promised to perform a magic act. What followed wasn't magic in the traditional sense, but a bizarre performance that became legendary. Martin began pulling random objects from his fly, an egg, a salt shaker, even a ringing telephone, keeping a perfectly straight face as the crowd howled in disbelief. Johnny at first played the straight man. He leaned back, watching politely as if waiting for the punchline to appear. But as Martin pulled out item after item, escalating the nonsense, Carson started to break. First a smile, then a chuckle, and before long he was laughing so hard he had to cover his face. This wasn't polite host laughter, it was real, uncontainable amusement, the kind Carson rarely showed on air. It was clear even Johnny had no idea what was coming next, and he loved it. The Great Fly-Dini routine has since been remembered as one of the strangest and funniest acts ever performed on the show. For Carson, who had seen thousands of comics come and go, it was a rare chance to be genuinely surprised, to feel like a member of the audience instead of the man in charge. When the camera stopped rolling, Johnny was reportedly still laughing, telling a producer, "That's the kind of thing that makes this job worth doing." It was a reminder that even the king of late night could still be entertained like the rest of us. When Robin Williams walked onto Johnny Carson's stage, the usual rhythm of a Tonight Show interview instantly dissolved. Most guests followed Johnny's lead, answering questions, trading jokes, keeping within the rails of late-night conversation. Robin, however, was like a live wire plugged into the studio. From the moment he sat down, he launched into rapid-fire impressions, physical gags, and wild tangents that turned Carson's desk into a prop and the set into his playground. The control room often panicked during these appearances, unsure where Williams was going or how long he would run. But Carson, rather than trying to rein him in, simply leaned back and let the chaos unfold. Sometimes he'd wipe away tears of laughter, other times he just watched in awe, looking more like a delighted audience member than the host of the show. Williams was one of the very few guests who could flip the power dynamic, forcing Johnny to follow his energy instead of the other way around. These moments became legendary because they captured something rare, the unflappable Carson surrendering the wheel and enjoying the ride. He once described Robin as lightning in a bottle that's already running away, and that was exactly how it felt. No script, no safety net, just pure manic brilliance colliding with Johnny's calm presence. The result wasn't just funny, it was exhilarating television that left audiences wondering what could possibly happen next. Frank Sinatra was not the kind of guest most comedians dared to toy with. His reputation, his connections, and his sheer aura of untouchable celebrity made him someone people treated carefully on television. But Don Rickles wasn't most comedians. When Sinatra appeared on The Tonight Show in 1976, Rickles unleashed one of his trademark roasts right in front of him, calling him overrated and poking fun as if Sinatra were just another guy in the audience at a nightclub. Carson's reaction told the whole story, half laughing, half watching nervously to see how Sinatra would take it. The tension was real. Everyone in the studio knew Sinatra had a temper, and Johnny had seen flashes of it before. For a moment, no one was sure if Frank would laugh along or bristle at the insult. Then came the release. Sinatra burst into laughter, clearly delighted that Rickles was bold enough to treat him like anyone else. The room shifted instantly from nervous energy to roaring approval. That exchange has been remembered as one of the gutsiest moments in Tonight Show history. Rickles proved that even the most powerful celebrity could be brought down to earth with the right mix of humor and timing, and Carson proved his show was a place where anything could happen. It wasn't just funny, it was cultural. A moment when the chairman of the board himself became part of the joke, and Johnny sat back smiling, knowing he had just hosted live television magic. By 1977, Dolly Parton was already a superstar, known not just for her powerhouse voice and songwriting, but also for her unapologetic sense of humor about her larger-than-life image. When she sat down with Johnny Carson, the two slipped easily into playful banter. But then Johnny made a remark that instantly became one of the most talked about lines in Tonight Show history. Looking at Dolly's outfit, he quipped, "I'd give a year of my life to peek under that blouse." The audience exploded in a mix of laughter and gasps. Dolly, quick on her feet as always, brushed it off with her trademark grace and laughter. She later said she took it as a compliment. But in the control room, the crew held their breath. Even for the looser standards of the 1970s, Carson's line was unusually direct, and the fallout was immediate. Viewer mail poured in, some praising his boldness, others condemning it as disrespectful. The moment was replayed in homes across America and quickly became one of the show's most infamous water cooler moments. Carson himself never publicly addressed the controversy, though insiders said he privately admitted he may have crossed a line. What made the moment endure wasn't just the shock value, it was what it revealed about shifting cultural standards on television. What once passed as cheeky humor was beginning to be scrutinized differently, and Johnny found himself caught at the turning point. Decades later, people still talk about it, a reminder that live television could be both a career highlight and a cultural lightning rod in a single sentence. For much of his career, Bob Hope was comedy royalty. His appearances on The Tonight Show were once highlights, quick, witty, and effortlessly charming. But by the 1980s, things had changed. Hope, then in his late 70s and 80s, often arrived with dated material, relying heavily on cue cards and recycled jokes. The problem wasn't just that the material felt stale, it was that Johnny Carson, a master of timing and sharp instincts, had to sit beside a legend whose act no longer connected with modern audiences. Johnny never disrespected Hope on air, but his body language told a different story. As Hope read through his cards, Carson would loosen his tie, glance at sidekick Ed McMahon, and force a smile that looked more strained with each line. He was too professional to cut Hope off, but viewers at home could sense his discomfort. One writer recalled Johnny muttering backstage after a particularly rough segment, "Hope doesn't listen, he just talks." It was a rare flash of candor about a peer he deeply admired but no longer found inspiring. The most awkward appearances became painful contrasts between Hope's past brilliance and his declining stage presence. For Carson, it was a sobering reminder that even legends could outstay their peak. Yet, he continued to give Hope space and respect on his show, honoring the man's place in comedy history even as the laughs grew thin. Those moments weren't Carson's funniest, but they were some of his most human, balancing reverence for tradition with the frustration of watching it fade in real time. Jimmy Stewart was a Tonight Show favorite, his gentle drawl and old Hollywood charm making him a perfect counterpoint to Carson's sharp wit. But in 1981, he brought something to the show that no one expected, a poem he had written about his beloved dog Bo, who had recently passed away. When Stewart began reading, Johnny and the audience likely anticipated a lighthearted tribute. Instead, the poem unfolded into a heartfelt meditation on love, loyalty, and loss. As Stewart's voice trembled through lines about reaching out at night to stroke a dog that was no longer there, the mood in the studio shifted. The room fell silent, the audience hanging on every word. And then came the rarest sight of all, Johnny Carson visibly moved, his composure cracking as he fought back tears. This was the man who could turn anything into a punchline, suddenly at a loss for words, caught up in the raw emotion of the moment. What made the segment unforgettable was its authenticity. There was no joke, no setup, no safety net, just Stewart's grief and Carson's unguarded response. For a host who had spent 30 years keeping his feelings hidden behind charm and wit, it was a stunningly human moment. That night, Johnny allowed the show to pause for something deeper than entertainment, and audiences never forgot it. Joan Embry of the San Diego Zoo was one of Carson's most reliable guests, always bringing exotic animals that guaranteed unpredictable television. But one night in the late 1970s, things escalated beyond anyone's comfort zone. She introduced a massive Burmese python, draping it across Carson's desk while explaining its habits. At first, Johnny leaned back with that familiar wary smile, cracking jokes to mask his unease. Then the snake started to move, slithering off the desk and directly toward him. Carson's reaction was pure instinct. He shot out of his chair in a blur, backing away with genuine fear written all over his face. The audience roared, not just at the snake, but at the rare sight of Johnny abandoning his usual cool demeanor. He wasn't the unflappable host anymore. He was just a man who very much did not want a 60-pound reptile crawling up his leg. Even the crew couldn't help laughing as they scrambled to capture the moment. Once the handler wrangled the snake back under control, Johnny returned to his seat, straightened his tie, and delivered the perfect punchline: "Somebody better check my pants." The line brought down the house, but what made the moment iconic was everything that came before it: the honest flash of panic, the vulnerability, and then the quick recovery. It was classic Carson, human first, comedian second, and always able to turn even fear into laughter. After 3 decades, Johnny Carson left behind more than just a talk show. He left behind a blueprint for what live television could be. His genius wasn't in flawless timing or scripted jokes, though he had both in spades. It was in those moments when the unexpected stormed onto a stage, and instead of fighting it, he leaned in. Whether it was a monkey wrecking his hair, a guest steamrolling the format, or a quiet song that cracked his composure, Johnny turned chaos into connection. That's why these clips still resonate today. They weren't just funny, they were real. In those unscripted beats, America didn't just see the polished host, they saw the man behind the suit, vulnerable, caught off guard, sometimes fearless, sometimes humanly afraid, but always ready with the right line to make the whole country laugh or cry with him. And maybe that's the real lesson of Carson's legacy. Perfection doesn't stick with people. Authenticity does. The king of late night wasn't immortal because he controlled everything. He was immortal because when he lost control, he made us love him even more. So which Carson moment shocked you the most? Drop your answer in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed reliving these Wild Tonight Show memories, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell.